Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Broadband U.S. podcast. I'm Craig Corbin, and it is a pleasure to welcome my guest today, Brad Turney, Network Design Solutions Manager with Hexatronic U.S. Brad, welcome to the Broadband U.S.
Thank you, Craig. So glad to be here and appreciate the opportunity to talk with you today.
Absolutely. You know, this is the second in our three-part series exploring microcabling with Hexatronic. You know, in our first conversation, we visited with Benny Blell, the Vice President of Sales. He talked about the value of microcabling systems versus traditional fiber optic cabling systems. And today we'll look at delivering the most reliable and scalable, cost-effective blown fiber solutions. But before we launch into what I think is going to be a very informational conversation, give our viewers a little bit of background on Brad Turney.
Glad to do it, Craig. Yes, I've been involved in the telecommunications industry for quite some time, over 35 years. My background is really in the outside plant network, the access network. And, I've done that for many years, done a lot of different things. But really everything that I've done has been involved in that arena, be it engineering, project management, business development, technical sales, things of that nature. And all of that, of course, speaks to the deployment of fiber optics. Yeah. And so I've been working with that for quite some time.
That's awesome. When you talk about deployment of fiber optics, we're sort of entering, I guess, what many people call the golden age, given all that's going on. It hasn't happened overnight, but there has been just such a tremendous need for the build out of fiber to the home broadband networks, as well as preparing for 5G deployment, and that has just fueled projects everywhere. And I know that for many, the microduct cable approach has quickly become a preferred infrastructure due to its speed. But let's talk first about how the programs that the federal government is rolling out. Just this week, we had the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Allocation announcement, the $42.45 billion. That for the next decade, Brad, that is going to fuel projects like you're talking about. Just real quickly, talk about how that's going to impact your part of the industry.
Well, absolutely. And I tell you, just a note, Craig, my new role I've only been with Hexatronic for about 18 months, okay. And I'm just thrilled, having a blast working with these guys. We're a small but growing team, and my role is working with supporting the sales team. Okay. I work closely with Mark Turner up in Minneapolis, and he's that's more in a business development role. And in that role, I'm educating along with Mark our prospective customers about our system. And then I'm also supporting, once we do bring customers on, I'm working closely with their engineering resources so that they fully understand our system, so that they can deploy it economically.
Yeah. One of the things you just mentioned, I think, is key, and that is educating the prospective customers, because there is so much to know and learn about microcabling, and we'll be launching into that in our conversation today. I'm curious, from your perspective, 30,000 foot view, what are some of the trends that are impacting the marketplace with regard to fiber of the home?
Well, obviously, really from the customer side, the user side, just the need for internet access.
Right.
The ongoing escalation of bandwidth growth, with all the apps and the streaming services, it seems that there's a seemingly insatiable appetite for bandwidth. Yeah. From the operator side, as we get more and more entrants into the industry building fiber networks, just the lowering the total cost of ownership, and then also speed of deployment.
Yeah.
Having the material available and how quickly it can be constructed. And those are certainly things that we feel like we can help our customers with quite a bit.
Absolutely. And one of the things that you mentioned, Brad, that I think is it's a change that has been made that's never going back, and that is the advent of streaming access and the use of apps and the absolute need for more bandwidth across the board. It's sort of the death knell for the traditional delivery of cable television as we've known it for decades, now into a form where it's just, making sure that you've got the bandwidth so you can load all those apps to get your programming. Obviously, the pandemic was part of that because you had more people working from home, need for telehealth, telemedicine, so it all sort of adds in there together.
Yeah. I was kind of thinking about our talk we were going to have this morning and thinking about how our company is a perfect example. I'm working with Mark Turner in Minneapolis, Mark Richmond in Orlando, Mark Todd in Salt Lake, Steve Dean over in the Carolinas. And we're scattered like so many companies are. But, with the availability of the bandwidth and having video conversations is it's certainly a changing world.
Absolutely. And we made mention a moment ago of the BEAD funding, the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment, just the latest in a series of programs. You had the IIJA, and I know that was a program that probably had an impact on your aspect of the industry as well.
Oh, certainly. In much of my career, I've worked so much with the tier one providers, and now I find myself in a role where I'm being introduced every day to someone new, in states all over the country, and it's very exciting to see these young people out there, making their way in the industry and considering our product, and we feel like we do have a lot to offer them.
And there are so many. You talk about the need for more in the workforce. That's something that will continue for years and years to come, and I strongly encourage those that have children that are reaching the end of their high school years to give strong consideration to looking at this industry because the opportunities are very rapid and phenomenal growth opportunities as well in the industry. Well, let's talk a little bit now about microcable, and I know that is part and parcel of the Hexatronic fiber to the home solution. Tell us a little bit about the differences between microcable and traditional fiber optic cable.
Well, absolutely, Craig. And I tell you what, I'll throw a disclosure out there. You talked to Benny a few weeks ago. You're going to be talking to Roger Vaughn, our VP of Engineering. Right. And both of those guys are much more product guys than myself. I'm an old outside plant engineer. But anyway, to me, the key for microcable, it's manufactured with less bend sensitivity.
Okay.
And it allows for a higher density fiber optic cable to be produced. And then the bottom line really is that this yields microcables that are about half the diameter and a third the weight of traditional fiber optic cables. So this, of course, facilitates the air-blown fiber technology that we're able to capitalize on with our system.
Well, and that's I think a key point because you're talking about being able to install it by either pushing or pulling, which the traditional is all pull.
Exactly. Exactly. Traditional fiber optic cable is pulled. We use the term air-blown fiber. What we really do is push the fiber through the microduct with air assist, essentially to float that fiber within the duct, lessen the friction, and facilitate the blowing.
Interesting. That is something that I actually look forward to being able to visit an implementation and see that in operation because that is something that I've never had the ability to do. Yeah. When we talk about the size of the fiber and the duct work, what are we looking at on that?
Well, I tell you, I'll hold one up here. This right here is our standard one-way 7 3.5 microduct. It's
Okay.
what we refer to as our drop microduct. What you see coming out of it, if you can, is a what we call our 12 fiber Stingray uh, fiber unit. It's
Okay.
really a bundle of fibers, and this right here to me is what allows us. We leverage this uh, to really design our whole system. So that fiber Stingray cable is uh, is 1.1 millimeters in
Okay.
diameter, very small as you can see, and so it is passing through what's known as a 7 millimeter duct. It's 3.5 millimeter inside diameter. So it's a very robust duct. Um, Again, so like 1.75 is the thickness
Right.
of that thick microduct, and it's very robust and can withstand being in the outdoor conditions without handhole enclosures, things of that nature.
And that goes back to the earlier point that you made with regard to the and flexibility might not be the right terminology, but the ability to bend a bit more than the traditional.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Interesting, interesting.
Hmm.
Let's look at when we talk about the emphasis on a microduct network. I would assume that a hexatronic fiber to the home design is quite different from one that employs traditional fiber optic cables. Let's talk about the major differences between a traditional design and the hexatronic solution.
Absolutely. With traditional fiber optic deployment, historically, it does involve a fiber distribution hub,
Hmm.
which is typically fed with maybe a 12 fiber, maybe a 24 fiber cable. Splitters are housed at that cabinet, but then exiting that fiber distribution hub are rather large distribution cables. In other words, based on the homes that you intend to serve.
Okay.
So, in looking at this diagram here that we're sharing, I'm showing as an example a 288 or a 432 fiber cabinet. Exiting that cabinet might be maybe as big as a 288 fiber cable.
Hmm.
That's naturally going to taper at some point as you have a lesser need for fiber. But at those taper points, you're going to have the need to splice that fiber. So I'm depicting the fiber optic splice closure there,
Hmm.
and then ultimately feeding a multi-port service terminal to to deliver service to the customer. But as you see here, those fiber optic splice closures are going to need some type of protection in the environment. And of course, today we're focusing on the underground solution. Hexatronic offers aerial solutions. We've also got a number of solutions, MDU solutions that Roger will be talking about in a few weeks.
Absolutely.
But what our solution will do is it allows us to eliminate these handholds. It allows us to eliminate the placement, defer the placement of the fiber cable, which is, of course, a huge capex savings.
That is massive. You're talking about not needing handholds, no pedestals.
Right.
You don't have the F2 fiber placement, and going back to the fact that there's not the need for immediate splicing. That's a big part
Right.
of the conversation.
Right. And Craig, that plays into this funding we were talking about because the metrics that are looked at in this space are homes passed and homes connected. Well, a lot of the guys that are chasing funding in this industry, they want to meet that homes passed threshold.
Yep.
So if you want to do it with a traditional deployment, you're going to be placing that fiber, you're going to be splicing that fiber, you're going to be housing those splice cases in handholds, pedestals of that nature. But that fiber has got to be spliced basically to the curb to meet that homes pass threshold.
Gotcha.
So again, you're when you think about it, you're placing and splicing a lot of fiber that will never be activated because you're not going to receive 100% take rate.
And immediately then you're talking about an investment in the infrastructure that literally is just sitting there,
Right.
not bringing value for the provider. And so that's a key part of it. And I think that also goes back to, and your reference to the BEAD funding, I think, is important, because with all of these programs, there are thresholds that have to be met by the providers with regard to the build out of their networks. Given whatever the plan is, but they have to meet those thresholds, and so being able to meet that is a big part of the conversation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So if we take a look at Hexatronic's answer to that situation, and this next visual here, again, we are going to have the fiber distribution hub. In
Right.
our case, I like to think of it as it's really a microduct network distribution point.
Okay.
At least that's what it is at the homes passed, in the homes passed phase. So if you look at this, we really have very few components, and I like to say that our solution is really quite elegant in its simplicity.
I like that term.
I tell a lot of the guys I work with who come from the world I come from, this is a lot simpler to design than sophisticated, telecommunications networks from back in the day, certainly. And it's a lot more like plumbing in some ways.
Sure.
Because what we are doing is we are establishing a home run dedicated pathway with this 735 microduct to every target address, and thereby establishing or meeting that homes passed threshold. So again, referring to the visual here, we do have the fiber distribution hub as the centralized, or in our case regionalized, part of the network.
Right.
I've got the microduct assembly itself shown here on the visual, and also holding one up. This is a duct access point.
Okay.
So what I'm showing here is this is a 12-way microduct assembly, and what we're depicting here is coming from the central office side over here. We're reaching our first two homes that we want to serve. So what
Right.
we're going to do is we're going to make a simple window cut, a sheath opening in this microduct assembly. We're going to pull out the two microducts that are dedicated to these homes that we're passing. In this case, red and black. We're going to pop a straight connector on those ducts, and then we'll extend them with the one-way from this duct access point over to the private property line. We'll put an end cap here to seal off those ducts going to the field, which are no longer in use.
Right.
But anyway, that gets us to the private property point. The next item on the visual here is what we call the Toby box.
Okay.
And it's essentially just a yard chamber, a flower pot. A lot of people know them as that. And really the purpose of that Toby box is simply a place to land that one-way microduct for future extension to the home at such time that the customer may request service.
Providing flexibility.
Exactly. We've got some customers that don't use them, but it's certainly it's an easy way to find the end of that microduct. We've also got electronic marker solutions as well if they'd rather go that way.
Okay.
But in that fashion, you've established a duct all the way to the private property, and the key there is once you've done that, you can then send a service technician, out to the neighborhood to activate service to the customer. No more permits required or anything of that nature. Now, I guess one thing I didn't mention is that within that fiber distribution hub, that's where we will house our splitters.
Okay.
And this 12 fiber Stingray that we looked at earlier it will ride one of these 735 ducts to that fiber distribution hub, and we'll go ahead and light up one, typically 1 by 32 splitter. And so that we've got the fiber optic capability to that point, and then, for service activation, we'll just simply blow a fiber, from the home back to this fiber distribution hub.
And I would assume, Brad, that that process that you just talked about is a fairly straightforward and fairly rapid process. Talk about that.
Absolutely. You have a little setup time in setting up our blowing machine and your compressor. We estimate 10 to 15 minutes maybe to do that, but the blowing process itself is very quick. It blows at over 300 feet a minute.
Wow.
So it really doesn't take very long. We set these fiber distribution hubs throughout the neighborhood. Our sweet spot is a 96 port capacity. So you're really not going that far, to each home.
Gotcha.
And so it can be done very quickly.
That's
Install the
beautiful.
customer termination box, and you're good to go.
That's awesome. Well, let's take a look at sort of doing an analysis, if we could, of this, just so that we can get our head around a deeper understanding of the cost savings that the Hexatronic solution offers. Obviously, we've already talked about homes passed and homes connected, but talk about how that all is part of that overall analysis.
So, Craig, I wanted to spend a few minutes to go through a business case that we worked with on with one of our customers last year over in North Carolina.
Yeah.
And we got a visual up here to look at a subdivision that they actually built out last year. And it's a very typical subdivision that we find that our customers, where they're deploying fiber today.
Nice.
This is a 180 home subdivision. It's very typical with the main entrance here that you see coming off the main road. Several cul-de-sacs throughout. Now, what I would tell you is that in a traditional fiber optic deployment, you would typically see probably a fiber distribution hub tucked just inside the neighborhood entrance. I know we've all seen, telecommunications cabinets like that through the years. And from there, they would then deploy the fiber cable that we've talked about. They taper it throughout the subdivision, utilizing those handholds and splice closures, and ultimately setting up multi-port service terminals. In our case, what we do, you can see here that we have divided this 180 home subdivision into two fiber serving areas depicted by the aqua lines.
Right.
And place two fiber distribution hubs within that development. So what we will do is, from our fiber access meet me point, as we call it, we're going to pick up our fiber here at the front of the subdivision. We'll bring that light yellow line there depicts simply a one-way 735 duct. That you might want to place more than that, but that's all that's really required. So all we're gonna blow into that subdivision is that same 12 fiber 1.1 millimeter fiber cable that I showed you earlier, and we will in other words, we will build the the microduct network to carry that, and so it will come to the first FDH, and we use the term daisy chain. We'll daisy chain from that point to the second FDH, and in doing so, we establish fiber to those fiber distribution hubs so that we're ready to serve anybody within the subdivision.
Nice.
I'll drill in just a little bit closer and show you, a little closer look at the network. Again, you see that one way coming in depicted in yellow. I'm using the green, depicts 24-way duct.
Okay.
The purple depicts 12-way duct. And the 2412 in one way are kind of our standard. We've got multiple sizes, 12, 19, 7, 4, and 2 in there. But most of our customers will standardize on a few sizes so they don't need to manage too many reels out there in the field.
Interesting.
But leaving that fiber distribution hub, in the best scenario, again, we utilize 96 port fiber distribution hubs,
Okay.
and that works out real nicely with 1x32 splitters. And most of our customers are using those. Typically, there'll be a 1x2 splitter to the north of that for an ultimate 1 to 64 delivery to the customer. But we'll place the 1x32, so 3 times 32 gives you 96, and it's a nice fit with this 96 port cabinet. So best case scenario, looking at one of the visuals where we're drilling in here, you'll see three of the green 24 ways heading to the east and then splitting off north and south, and you actually see a green and a purple heading to the west, which would be a 24 and a 12, so 36. But really just getting to enough microduct assembly capacity to serve the homes that you're trying to serve.
Awesome.
The other thing I'll point out, in our typical design, we will place our main microduct assembly on one side of the road.
Okay.
And then we'll cross to pick up typically 2 homes on the other side. So you see that depicted here with the light yellow. The black dots that are on the screen here represent our duct access points that I held up before. So you're going to place that microduct assembly along the road. You're going to build your duct access point, and then from there you're going to simply kick out with these 2 ways to our Toby box. And I'll hold up our Toby box. It's just a small yard chamber, not very imposing at all, being placed in the yard.
Exactly.
And again, that's just a landing point for these microduct drops. And when I speak of this, most of our customers are involved in success-based deployments.
Right.
So in other words, they're not going to extend that microduct and blow that fiber to the home if they don't have a service order. So, in the event that you have a situation where you have maybe a deal with a homeowners association, no need to place this Toby box. Just place that microduct all the way to the home and go ahead and blow the fiber and activate the service.
And to your point, that is a direct cost savings. And when we begin looking at the numbers of this,
right,
that makes a tremendous difference versus a traditional implementation and right, something that provides, again, ultimate flexibility for right, a developer as they build out a new subdivision.
Yes, you defer the cost of that fiber placement until the service activation, which is very key.
A big part of the conversation is getting to the dollars and cents, the actual analysis of how much one could save by taking this approach. Talk to us about that.
Absolutely. So I know I've talked a lot about it. If we'll just get quickly to a little summary of the analysis we worked through when we built the white paper. And again, we break this into homes passed and homes connected. Okay. Look at the material and look at the labor. But just a quick look at that, you'll see that the conduits, we categorize this into conduits, cables, and connectivity. Okay. There's not a big difference on the conduits themselves, a little more on the conventional side due to all of the handholds that are involved. The cables, as we talked about, we're not gonna place much cable in the homes passed piece of it. So quite a bit more there on the conventional side. But then the big number is the connectivity. Right. And you've got the fiber distribution hub in both solutions, but with the conventional, you've got obviously a lot of the splice cases involved that really adds up. So that's driving 54% material labor savings there with our solution.
And Brad, that is a huge number. I mean, that is a staggering figure when you talk about the size of some of these projects.
Exactly, exactly. I tell you, when you start looking at the labor end of it, obviously it's expensive to directional bore and put this conduit in the
Right.
ground,
Right.
and that's overwhelmingly the biggest needle mover that you'll see. So you see the huge numbers here. We're a little bit more expensive there on getting the conduits in the ground. Obviously, we've got to dig the pits for the duct access points and get that built. Again, placing of the cables, we're not placing much. We're placing that Stingray to light up the FDHs. The connectivity, again, that's where your huge number is with all of that splicing. So we end up with about 21% lower labor costs in our calculations, for the homes passed piece.
And still a substantial number. As we look, though, at homes connected, how does that compare?
Well, that flips a little bit. We feel like we can save you a bunch, but if you think about it, I like to say that we really eliminate the F2 portion of the network. In other words, we don't place any of that distribution fiber, therefore we don't splice it. However, when we go to activate service, you realize we've got to go a little bit further to get back to that fiber distribution hub than the conventional method goes in getting to the MST, the multi-port service terminal.
Gotcha.
So if you look at the breakdown there on the material, we've got some costs for the conduit. We're going to extend that conduit to the home when we get that request for service activation. That's not necessary in the conventional, as they're just going to place a fiber drop. And then you look at the rest of it there. The cables is about a wash. Ours, again, is a little more because we're going further.
Sure.
And then the connectivity is about a wash. But, again, 44% higher material cost in our case there. So, we're eroding a little of those savings as we activate service.
Gotcha. But when we add everything in together, when we look at projected savings with the Hexatronic solution, it's pretty impressive.
Yeah. So, just our final graph where we tried to summarize the projected savings, this would indicate close to 30% from our calculations in cost savings on the homes passed portion of the build. Again, a little more cost to connect the service, but we feel like if you've got a 50% take rate, it looks like we're still about in a 25% savings overall. So I feel like
I'm sorry about that, but impressive numbers.
Yeah. Well, a lot of our new customers are seeing that and moving our direction. It's very exciting.
Absolutely. And I know for someone that's been in the industry as long as you have, that's exciting to see what the impact that it can make, especially given the need for expansion of fiber in so many places. Final thoughts as we wrap up today, Brad.
Absolutely. Well, just again, I'm just so enjoying being a part of the Hexatronic team. Yeah. Great group of guys, a small team but a growing team, and we're obviously seeing a lot of growth in our business, and really enjoying it here at the twilight of my career.
There you go. Well, listen, have so much enjoyed all that we've been able to learn today, and I know that we'll have one more session in this three-part series, but thanks so much for everything today. Look forward to talking with you down the line.
Thanks, Greg. Enjoyed it.
Absolutely. On behalf of Brad, we'll see you next time right here on the Broadband Universe. So long, everyone.